So now that we learned how to create a sign-in component and a sign-in form using Bootstrap, let's go and implement the functionality for the sign-in form. So I'm going to click OK to close out that window, and then I'm just going to go back over to Visual Studio Code. We'll stop our server. We can close down the terminal window, and let's go ahead and open up the signin.component.ts file. Now inside this, we're going to add a variable, and that variable is going to be called isLoggedIn. And we're just going to change its value to false. We also need to import over the router, so we're going to say import router, and this is from Angular's built-in router module. Inside the constructor's parentheses, we are going to say private router, and then it's going to be of type router. Inside our sign-in function that we created in the last lecture, we're going to actually implement this isLoggedIn logic. So we're going to say this.isLoggedIn equals true, so that when they click the sign-in button, we're going to say they're authenticated with our application. Then we're going to say this.router.navigate, and now we want to navigate them to the home component. We also want to use the query params, so we're going to do, and as you can see from IntelliSense, there's the second field called extras. So we're going to do an open and closing curly brace. We're going to say query params, and then we're going to have another open and curly brace, and we're going to say isLoggedIn, and we're going to give it the value of isLoggedIn. Just go ahead and save it. And then after the isLoggedIn, then we also want to add skip location, and we want to say true. So we'll go ahead and save this. Then we're going to go ahead and open up the home.component.ts file. And inside the home.component.ts file, we're just going to change this to isLoggedIn, and we're going to give it a Boolean. And then inside the constructor is where we're actually going to try to look up and get the value that we just passed over in the query params. But before we can do that, we need to import over the activated route. So we're going to say import activated route. And that is from the Angular's router module. And then inside the constructor, we're actually going to import over that. So we're going to say private route, and then activated route. So now we want to say this.isLoggedIn equals, we're going to use the Boolean because we want to cast the value that's being passed over into a Boolean. We're going to say this.route.snapshot.queryParamMap .get isLoggedIn. So what are we doing? We're using the activated route, and we're specifically looking for the query param map function .get isLoggedIn. So if you remember from the sign-in component, we have this entry we added that says query params, and then inside the query params we have this object called isLoggedIn, and we gave it a value of this.isLoggedIn, which, if you remember, we're setting to true when the user hits the sign-in button. So the activated route is actually trying to access the query params map function for isLoggedIn. And just to remind everyone, make sure that this name coincides with the name you're trying to access from the .get. So in other words, if I change this to ID, but in my sign-in component where I'm actually setting the query params, if I set it isLoggedIn, I'm going to get an error when I try to run this application because ID does not exist. So in other words, I have to make sure that whatever I'm trying to access, there's actually a value that represents that represents what I'm trying to access. So in this case, isLoggedIn is the name of the actual value that we're passing in the query params. So I just need to say is logged in. We'll go ahead and save this, and then let's go ahead and open up a terminal window and we'll run it and see what we have. So we'll say ng serve. All right, so let's go ahead and open up a browser window. We'll hit refresh on the screen. And now, if I click on the submit button, I should be taken to the actual home page, which is going to show all of our details. So let's go back and let's demonstrate what happens if we don't go through this sign-in component. So in other words, if I go directly to the URL and I type in /home and click enter, I'm going to see this error message that says you're not authorized to view this content. Well, that makes sense because if you remember from the sign-in component, we're specifically passing over is logged in, and we're setting that value to true when you select the submit button. So if I don't go through the sign-in component, then the is logged in value is going to be false. And if you remember from the code we had on a previous exercise, the home component is actually showing if they're logged in, let's go ahead and show the home page. But if they're not logged in, then we're going to show this error message that says that you're not authorized to view this content. So in this example, we've shown how to pass values to a component through the query params and simulated how you might want to achieve authorization and authentication in an Angular project. In this series of lessons, we learned how to add routing to an existing project, how to create a sign-in form, and how to pass data to components using query params. In our next set of lessons, we'll learn how to create services, and we'll have a deep understanding of dependency injection in an Angular project. Thanks for watching.